Hey, how are you, folks? Jason Horowitz. Glad to be with you here on CBSSports.com. It's Parrish's three-pointers the last week of the regular season for the Big Six conferences. So, like everybody else, let's talk bubble teams. Let's bring in our college basketball columnist, Gary Parrish. And Gary, before we get into specific teams and the Big Six conferences, does it seem to you that there are just more bubble teams this year than in recent memory?
Yeah, nobody wants to secure an at-large bid. I mean, every time somebody gets on a roll and you start going, okay, they're safe, they look in good shape, then they lose a bad game. And so it's not just exclusive to one league. It's happening all over the country, and it's why going into this final week of the regular season, we got a whole bunch of teams with a lot of work to do.
It seems like maybe 23, 24 at-large bids would be secure. So we're looking for those other 10. So let's go conference by conference, start in the ACC. You got 4 teams there: Maryland, Miami, Virginia Tech, and, of course, Boston College. Any of those teams safe? Or are they all in trouble?
They're not all in trouble. None of them are safe. I mean, they are very clearly on the bubble. Still have work to do. Can't afford to take another bad loss. But particularly Miami, because if they were to take another one, then that's 9 ACC losses. How many are you really going to let them get away with? Boston College and Maryland both have nice wins, but and RPIs that are respectable, not great. But again, 8-6 in the ACC for BC, 7-7 in the ACC for Maryland. The thing they got going for them is the ACC is statistically the toughest league in the country, so they'll get some leeway there, but they need to close strong or else risk getting left out.
Well, speaking of closing strong and getting to 500 in conference, that's what a couple of teams in the Big East are doing that are starting to make some noise, at least of late. Georgetown with its win over Villanova. Notre Dame has that chance tonight to beat Villanova. What about those two teams?
You know what? At one point, it looked like both were totally out. But Georgetown's sitting there now, coming off the win against Villanova. Strength of schedule, #1 in the country. They've got a chance. It's a slim chance. But, again, they've got wins over UConn and Memphis, 2 possible #1 seeds. Their body of work, in terms of their quality of wins, are pretty impressive. But they got a whole bunch of losses. They still got some work to do. Notre Dame, if they can get to 500 in the Big East, finish there, and then make a run in the Big East tournament, I think they're in play. But they need, like you said, to knock this one out at home against Villanova. Otherwise, they're up against it.
What about Providence and Cincinnati also in the Big East?
You know what? They're both in play. I think the Big East is going to end up with, maybe 8, possibly 9, but probably 8 teams. And so Cincinnati and Providence are both in play for those spots. I tend to give the advantage right now to a Notre Dame team because, again, they got some quality wins. They played a ridiculously tough schedule. And if they can get more accomplished over the next week or so. But Cincinnati sitting there at 8-8 in the Big East has got a chance. This is going to be an 8-9 bid league, and all these teams are fighting for those spots.
And that's the thing we always have to remember. It's not balanced scheduling here, so 10-7 may not be the same as 8-8 because of the fact that, hey, you're not playing the same teams. Let's move to the Big Ten here, where again, it's not a balanced schedule, but you still play everybody, Gary. It's a smorgasbord in the middle. How do you sort it out?
A bunch of average teams that you look at, and at one point Minnesota looked good, but they start to fall apart. Ohio State looks good on paper. I mean, every 6 top 50 wins, but then they get blown out against Purdue over the weekend. Michigan, every time they win a nice game, they lose they lose a bad one. Again, we're going to have 3 teams at the top that are locked: Michigan State, Illinois, Purdue. The rest of them, they all have work to do. Wisconsin might be in the best shape of all of them. RPI is 32, strength of schedule 4. From a computer standpoint, they look pretty solid, but everybody else has got some work to do.
Gary, in the Big 12, you got 3 teams that are coming on of late: Kansas State, Oklahoma State, and Texas A&M. Thoughts on them?
I'm just shocked that Oklahoma State's in this position. I mean, RPI is now at 30, strength of schedule 11. They've knocked off Texas this weekend. It's a pretty good job for Travis Ford in his first year there. Texas is, you know what, I keep waiting for this team to turn the corner. You thought the win over Oklahoma would do it, and yet, here they are again, coming off a loss. They're fine because they got some nice wins early. They're 19-9, 8-6 in the Big 12. RPI in the top 40, but this team is not playing its best basketball at the time when you need to be.
Gary, when you get to the SEC, again, LSU is probably the only lock. The other 4 teams, although South Carolina is looking pretty good. But what about the 2 teams that lost at home this weekend, Florida and Kentucky? You were there in Lexington, and we've seen what Florida has done this year. Your thoughts on those 2 squads?
They're both in trouble. And you know what? They might end up playing a play-in game next weekend in Gainesville. I mean, these are 2 teams that, they don't have much there. They got Kentucky has 19 wins, Florida has 21, but there's not a whole lot in place. And then Florida gets beat on its home floor by a Tennessee team that hasn't really been able to go on the road and beat people. Kentucky loses a game where they have a double-digit lead in the second half. I think they'll both win their middle-of-the-week games, and then next Saturday they both are going to need that win next weekend, and whichever one gets it, I think will be in okay shape, and the one that doesn't is going to be needing probably an SEC tournament title to get into the NCAA tournament.
And, of course, that's coming next week. Meanwhile, the Pac-10, at least the regular season title, is going to go to Washington, at least a share of it. One team, though, that seems to be it. One team in the Pac-10 that's on the bubble, and that seems to be Arizona and its consecutive streak. What do you think the Wildcats have to do the rest of the season to continue that streak?
Well, they're really playing poorly at the wrong time. They needed to at least split on this road trip, coming off the loss to Arizona State. They took some bad losses early. They started playing well, but now they're just 8-8 in what is a very average Pac-10. I think they're up against it. They're going to have to close strong, win some games in the Pac-10 tournament, or else they're going to miss the NCAA tournament for the first time in a long, long time.
They get Stanford and Cal at home to finish off the regular season. Gary Parrish, thank you very much, sir. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Jason.
All right, folks, for more bubble talk or who's in, who's out, all that stuff, and, of course, conference tournaments starting this week as well, be sure to stay with CBSSports.com. For Gary Parrish, I'm Jason Horowitz. Take care, folks.